Circle to the left when the sun goes down on my side of town. That lonesome feeling comes through my door. Left out a man, do side.
All right, here we go. Another Square Dance Callers Talking. Tonight, I've got a caller that I've taken some schools from. I've talked to him on a few occasions. Tonight, I'm going to let him tell his story. I have Bill Harrison tonight. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Charlie. How you doing?
I'm doing very good. And where are you at? Where do you live now?
I live in a little town called Cheltenham, Maryland, and that's between Upper Marlboro and Waldorf, Maryland. So it's like the very tip of southern Maryland.
Okay. Been there your whole life? Born and raised there or no?
No, born and raised in Baltimore and in the Glen Burnie area, Annapolis.
I
So
didn't
it's
know
really
that.
the
I got
general.
my Orioles hat on.
Yep, definitely a general area to this location. So
Okay.
all my life in this general area. Yeah.
Very nice. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, most people I've talked to, some people have moved all over, whether it be military or just life in general. I'm from Georgia my whole life, never lived anywhere else, and
Mhm.
a lot of callers are that way, same general area. Um, you have an extensive background in square dance calling. Before we get into that, tell me when this all started for you. When did you start calling?
I started in 1970.
Okay.
And in our area, we were very fortunate to have. Now, I'll go back and regress a little bit. In 1970, I was 13,
Okay.
and I had already been dancing probably since 1960. Uh, I'm guessing maybe 66, 67 at the most. And my parents were involved in square and round dancing. But once again, in that era, round dancing and square dancing were two separate entities. And so when I went and learned square dancing, nothing like we have today, no standardization. There was a lot less calls to learn. And there were a lot of teen clubs in our area. And we probably had 4 to 5 teen clubs. I would estimate that a minimum of 10 squares apiece. And so we had a lot of amateur nights throughout these teen clubs. And I joined one called the Oxon Hillbillies, which is out of Oxon Hill, Maryland, which from where I live today is not that far. But when I went to that club back when I was a teen, I lived in another area called Glen Burnie. So it took probably 40 minutes or more to get there. So anyhow, we had a young caller who called for that club, and we had an amateur night. And I said, gee, I'll volunteer to do this. And we had a lot of the teens who would do singing calls, and some would do some patter or what have you. And I said, well, I think I'm going to try a whole tip. So after the one dance that we had, we stopped at a local restaurant, and that started a path of what I thought I might want to do. So we sat there, and on the back of this mat, paper mat, the caller wrote some sequences down for a short little patter, and he gave me a singing call to learn, and that's what I did. I just until the amateur night came up, I practiced every day, and I memorized that whole sheet of those sequences, so that when I got up there, I didn't have to look at anything, read anything. I just had all that memorized, and did the singing call. And it was I caught the bug, and of course my parents said, "So you want to learn how to square dance call?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, "And the reason?" I said, "Because I just think it's interesting." And they said, "It's not because of the girls?" I said, "No." I said, "I really think I have." They said, "Okay, now if you're going to go down this road, we're going to do it the right way." I said, "Okay, fine." So from that day forward, um, that's how I started my calling. So I learned that summer from Mac Parker. Now, Mac Parker was uh, a mathematician, and I could be wrong in my statement, but I believe he was kind of like the creator of equivalents and zeros.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I can't swear that he actually did it, but for some reason in the back of my mind, as I learned years later, that he was like, he definitely was the believed mathematically that if you would learn equivalents and zeros and so forth, there are so many combinations and substituting that you could do
Mhm.
that you could just call dance after dance after dance and never call the same dance the same way. So that's how I learned. And we did that every Monday all through the summer and had a big dance at the end of it. And the next thing, this big dance, of course, back in our day, that time frame, dancers were plentiful.
Sure.
And so, big crowds would be, even for us who were new callers in that session, 25 squares or so would show up.
Mm.
And we all got a chance to call and do our thing. And I started getting hired. And I started getting hired for like a fill in, for example, like you were a season caller and had a club and maybe something came up, a work duty, or you were going to go out of town. Could you come and do my club dance tonight? That type of thing. That's how I got started. So I never really started at the very bottom as far as beginners and trying to find a place to go to. I was kind of fortunate that I started to take off a little bit and start doing dances. And it
Wow.
wasn't until probably 3 years, 4 years later, about 3 years later, I had an offer from a caller named Jack Lazary. And Jack was very, very prominent, not only in Caller Lab, but a very prominent in the challenge. He's one of the starters of challenge. He's the one who got Lee Cotman and Chuck Stinchcomb from our area, um, and some others involved. Keith Gully, who became one of the top guys in that field over the years, started in the challenge movement. And Jack and I became good friends. And I had already written one or two calls that were published in his notes by the time I was calling 3 years. And so he said, "Look, I got this school up in New England." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "But I think I read somewhere that's 5 years and above." He said, "Oh, don't worry. You're already there. I'd like for you to come." So I said, "Oh, wow, that would be great." So I talked to my mom and dad, and that time I was fortunate that I had a mentor, and his name was Jocko Manning. And he took me under his wing, and he did more than teach me about calling. Because you got to remember now, I'm probably about 15 years old by now, to going on 16, because I had my permit at that time. So I talked to them, and my parents said, "There's a week just before it that's run by Earl, Johnston, and Al Brundage, and it's for the newer caller." And I think you may have been to that school. Maybe not that school, but that's how Ken and Randy Page they took that
Okay.
school over
Yep.
after the other guys
Okay.
retired from it. Ken then left that school, took a little hiatus, and I believe he came back and started the school that I think you've been to up there.
Yes. Yeah. I've been to
It's the
Ken's
same.
up there.
Yes. So anyhow, um, they said, "We'll see if we can swing it financially. If you go to the first school, then we'll stay the second week," because both of the weeks were back to back. And I said, "Wow, that would be great." So I said, "Okay, fine." So my mom and I drove all the way up to New Hampshire, and we went to Al's and Earl's school, and the staff along with them that year was Vaughn Parrish and Jim Mayo. And Vaughn took me under his wing and really worked with me on enunciation and all kinds of different things. And we would spend after hours of the lessons working with things that he felt that I needed. And by the time I got through that full school, I said, "I think I want to go home." And my mom says, "You're not going to stay for Jack's?" Well, of course, I knew my mom and dad, financially it would be, tough for them, but they were willing to make sure that they had planned for it. So
Mhm.
I said, "No, I think I need to come back and take some of this information because there was so much that I could already do going to the first school, that I could look at other things that they had to offer through that whole school and pick out the things I needed to work on and the things I needed to do. So I came back and I had done a St. Patrick's event for a church group, which one of my friends who square danced, her mother was a leader in that church, and I had already done this for them, and they wanted to do it again. So it struck me to say, look, hey, I'll do this again if you offer the kids the possibility of learning square dancing. And I said, you guys can run it. You can charge what you want. You can do what you want. I just wanted the experience of teaching a class.
Yeah.
So I hadn't done that before. And I have all this other choreography. And so I didn't have to worry about that. I mean, I had the singing calls down pretty good. I didn't have to worry about that either, but I'd never really taught anything. So, and by that time frame, we had sets in order. I can't remember, it's blue book and then yellow, or it could have been yellow and then blue book. I just can't remember which one it was. Let's say it was the blue book, 50 calls. And then we had the yellow book, which was called the extended 25, which was the 75 calls you needed to learn square dance so you could dance, in your area, pretty much. So, okay, fine. So I had those books. They agreed to it. And my first class yielded 10 squares of kids. And so now I'm starting to get more rounded because I've already been calling club dances. It's a lot easier just to show up and do one night than it is to do every week.
Right.
As you well know with the club, I mean, that's hard work. And I still do it today, but it's not like hitting the road and saying, I'll do this dance and I'll do that dance in this town and I'll move to the next town and do, because you can keep the same dance for
Yep. Do
quite
the
a few
same set.
towns, but you can't do that with your club members. So I started a teen club. So I added another teen club to the area. And like I said, we had a lot of kids back in those days. So many that each club sponsored what we call the Teen Square Nade is what this was called, and that was held in that club's area, be it Northern Virginia, the suburbs of Maryland, okay, the Washington metropolitan area. And that club would benefit from any profits. So they would have to get the school or the venue. They'd have to set up the callers. That called for the teen club to come in and call. They had to put a program together for the full day. They had to provide things like lunch and so forth like that for the kids and all that. And we'd have 30, 35 squares minimum of kids for all day. We do it all day and all night. And so and that, like I said, whatever profits were left over went to that sponsoring club. So having that was a real big incentive and getting involved in the calling aspect because you had dancers. And today it's a little more difficult for newer people because when I get back home from a caller school, they may not have that opportunity, readily available to them to kind of get started. And that's what they need. They need to get started and they need to have that practice time. And so, and anyhow, that's how it all kind of began for me. And I just kept going forward until I finally went full time December of '84. And several months later, I ended up going full time because the company I was working for was downsizing. And I worked at that time for Digital Equipment Corporation, which is based out of New England. At the time it was. And they decided to it was the beginning of corporate cutbacks. So they took, in our branch, seniority. They had to have 3 people. They had to cut back three people. And so they went by seniority. And there's 3 of us that didn't have enough years in. So I went full time. on February 1st. And all I did was pretty much model myself after Jack Lasry, trying to build a home program. That's all I did. I would do Saturday specials regionally, but I wouldn't take any weekends. I wouldn't do anything out of town other than the regional stuff, like a one day or one night type thing. And after about a year and a half, I had a really good program going here, which has lasted so far till today. I still have my clubs I started back in '84 still going. So
That is amazing, Bill. Gosh.
yeah, so
Hmm.
but
So you
also
could,
a lot of luck with my peers
mhm.
uh, who have had faith in me to do uh, the calling job, etc. That's another part of the puzzle, and it's a big part of the puzzle actually. Um, so I've been thankful for all of that as well. So anyhow, that's my story, and as they say, quote quote, I'm sticking to it.
Sticking to it. Now, you mentioned earlier about some C calls and all that. How high a level do you call and dance?
I go to C2.
Okay.
Yeah, that's as far as I go.
And now the clubs that you have that you've had since the 80s, what do you do with the, I mean, that's every week. And it's like I understand because up until a year and a half ago, I'd only picked up, I would get hired for dances, you know. So I would go, like you said, I'd go to a caller school. By the way, I was going to say I was going to bring this up, the Atlanta Caller School that you signed off on.
Yes,
So I'm an official caller. And there's the picture with Ken Ratusi when he had a school in 2016.
that's right.
Um, so back in 2016, 2017, when I was going to one or two schools a year, I would get a week's worth of this is how you get to the corner. This is a zero. This is an equivalent, and just all the different things you go through. And this is how you stand and hold your mic. I'd go back and it'd be 3 weeks before I had a dance.
Yes,
Or somebody would come up and say, hey, do a tip for me, which is great, but I can't squeeze everything into that. And, I
absolutely.
appreciated all those opportunities, but you can't put it to work. And it's just like I tell people, you could go take Spanish for 12 weeks.
Hmm.
If you don't leave the next week and start speaking Spanish to somebody, you're not going to be good at it. You're going to forget a lot of it.
Exactly right.
And I've had a club hire me about a year and a half ago now, and a really good club. And we've taught classes. I've done the SSD program twice, mainstream once. I've done a plus class from beginning to end also. And I've learned so much from that, more than
Yes,
the dancers, I'll tell you that. And it's just like you said, there was a time when I had about 8 singing calls and I had probably 45 minutes of patter in my head
correct.
that if you hired me, I could come on Friday and do it. And then next Friday, I'd be one county over and I'd do that same thing. And I
Absolutely.
thought, this is the easiest gig in the world. But when you got a club, I bought 2 new songs last night
Hmm.
for my dance next week.
Correct.
And, because I can't go in there with the same stuff every week. They
Yes.
wouldn't appreciate it. And I feel like I'm not doing the job. So
Yeah.
I'm 100% behind you on that, man.
Yeah.
Um, whenabouts did you join Caller Lab?
Um, well, when I joined Color Lab, I'm sure you probably already know this in some of your interviews. Back when Color Lab started in '75, I mean officially,
Okay.
it was an invitation only,
Yep.
so you had to be invited. And so one of our callers in our area, Charlie Shoemaker, um, a good friend of mine, he invited me to Color Lab, and I believe he invited me around 1976, and I actually, and it may have been exactly, I can't remember if it was in '76 or if he really did it in '77. And I got the invitation, and I went '77. So that's my first one I attended, and I believe that may have been the actual invite, but I can't swear to that. I thought it might be in '76.
Okay.
Um, but I'm going to say, because I really don't know for sure, '77 is when I got the invite, and I went in '77. And I, at that time, the requirement to be a member was you could, you had to attend within 4 years.
Mhm.
So, and if you didn't attend in 4 years' time, then you were dropped as a member.
Okay.
Uh, so at that time, I was going, but not like every year. And then eventually, I built up to where I was going quite often, and that was again encouragement from my peers to take on jobs and be chairman of, well, at the one time it was called the Full-Time Callers Committee, and we changed that name to Career
Okay.
Callers Committee. And the reason we did that is because a lot of people get hung up on titles
Mhm.
for I think that's just a normal human nature type thing. So when I went, as we would say, quote, full-time caller, I, I paid all my bills, I put food on the table, I sent my kids to school on that income and my wife's income.
Okay.
Okay. Um, there are callers who have retired from something and they collect their pension or whatever, and they are now able to call every night of the week. And so they wanted to be considered full time callers as well.
Mhm.
And the gist of the committee was really for those who are actually out there providing a household, et cetera, expenses and so
Okay.
forth, paying with their calling money to survive and live and so forth like that. So we were looking for things that would benefit those callers, such as insurance was a big factor. And it took me a while. I was a chairman of that committee for a number of years, and we got pretty close to getting insurance. But the problem is that we don't have enough of those guys
Mhm.
who have a bundle package that an insurance company really wants to say, yeah, we'll take you. Um, but at any rate, we got close one time and it kind of fell through. But in the meantime, we had to struggle with that full time caller name. And so we changed it to career caller, meaning, hey, your career is your calling, period. And that seemed to separate a little bit about what we were shooting for and trying to get help for those of us who are self-employed and if you didn't get your insurance through your wife or something of that nature,
Mhm.
that we could maybe through the organization provide something like that. Also, traveling across boundaries, like Canada, was a big factor. You
Okay.
know, can we get a reciprocal type thing that we can go both ways? They can come here and call, we can call our. So we were working on that through the Canadian callers, um, trying to get something so that any caller could go across into Canada and vice versa, and not have to worry about stipulations. Yes, you can on this side of the border, but you can't on the other side of the border. That kind of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that committee really worked on for a number of years.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And you stayed active in Caller Lab. What
Oh
other
yes.
positions and all you held?
Well, I was the when we had the quarterly selections, I was the advanced quarterly chairman. Um, let's see. Then I was eventually I was asked to be the vice chairman of the advanced committee to help keep the chairman at the time um, on the straight and narrow and kind of
Mhm.
get things done. And then eventually I stepped into that position. And I was a little leery at that because unfortunately, I have a big stigma about speech, like getting up in front of a group and just talking to them. Um, you can give me 1,000 squares of dancers and I call all night to them.
Uh,
Once people are sitting
uh,
in a chair, I just struggle with um, my projection and things like that. And I know that. And I even took it in high school. I got to learn speech. I got to get up and you hear the things, well, just picture them in their underwear. I
yeah,
don't want to picture them in their underwear. And I just never really been that good at that presentation.
I
So
understand.
some of these things I was really leery about, but I found a really good niche when I had a committee and I could get in a little room somewhere, and even though they were sitting, I was talking about, the committee and how it was going to work, and I had goals set for myself, and I had vice chairman through my tenure that were really good working partners. And I was a believer in my chairmanship that my vice chairman has as much of a role as I do. And so that working camaraderie was essential because not only did I have the chairmanship, but they also had the vice chairmanship, and you could just really erase the vice from their name because they had as much responsibility as I did. And I made sure of that. So they were working just as much as I was working, and we worked together. And that's what I really wanted to have. And I think probably because of that type of attitude, it kept me in those kinds of positions throughout Color Lab, which I'm very happy for and proud of all the people who participated. So I've been in quite a few committees and chaired them, and we made a lot of progress throughout the years. When I first took over the advanced committee, there probably was about, I don't know, 50, 60 items that had been years in the taking, and we were able to clean it up and by the time I left, and and have all those issues taken care of. So when somebody else came in, they were starting scratch. So and that was a big project, and that was a goal of mine. It became a challenge, and I had good committee people. I had very, very good response. Our response to our committee throughout all the years that I was involved was over 80%. Um, so it really was a good, and every year we worked on something. I mean, all the time. It was never a year that we were dormant at all. And I have to take off my hat to all the people who were involved in making that happen. So they were really good people and had the organization at heart and the dance program at heart. So, yeah.
Yeah, Call Lab is very important to me.
Oh yeah.
It's kept me in it a couple times. I try not to bring it up because I don't like when I listen to other podcasts about anything where they talk about COVID and all that stuff. It really hurt our um, jobs, our occupation, our dancers, our lifestyle for a couple of years. But
Yes.
that being said, not for Caller Lab, I may have gotten completely out of it.
Right.
Just the constant contacts in the GSI school that they were putting up, on a
Yes.
regular basis, and just seeing some of the people, I thought I can't walk away from this because at one point I thought we're never going to do this again.
Right.
But Caller Lab was very important to me through there, and I was a huge fan of it prior to. But yeah, during those times a couple of years ago, there were times that I told people I work with currently in law enforcement, I was like,
Sure.
I'm never going to do that again. Probably won't happen,
And
because I
here
didn't
you are.
see I didn't see an end to it. And but it's coming back a little bit. The numbers they were down before, so I'm not using that as an excuse.
Correct.
Um, and what do we do to get it back? I don't know. We just keep plugging away at it, and so it's
Yeah,
just
we
us
need
going out
to. We have to have more people who are able to teach new dancers. We have to
there.
get more callers. There's a lot of our callers who have taught for many years. Some have taught two, three classes every year. They're retiring out. They've gotten older and so forth, and we've lost a lot of those good, as we call it, in the trench teaching, putting the dancers on the floor to attend weekends and festivals and special events and jamborees and things like that, and that traveling callers can come through and call and have a big group, and not only that, the area callers when they get together and they decide to do something. When a callers association would do something years ago, I mean, it was a huge crowd that came out and supported it,
That is
and
true.
yeah, and it's we just got to get back to having more new dancers, teaching new dancers, and more callers to learn to be able to do that.
There's
And like we said at the very beginning of this whole thing, it's very difficult to go up and learn all this information and come back, and it's like maybe 6 months, 8 months down the road, and you're like, what did I do? I learned that 8 months ago, but I don't have that. I can't put my finger on it because I haven't done it in
Yep.
8 months, and so it really is tough. But for Color Lab, I tell you, I got on the board. I did 27 years in a row. Um, Very, very proud of that. I think
Yes.
not this past one, but the year before was my last year,
Okay.
and and boy, that was a lot of fun. I served 2 years on the executive committee, and those 2 years were phenomenal, um, because it was the same group of 5 people, um, doing the EC. So you didn't have to refresh anything from one year to the next. And that was a big accomplishment because that was during the time that we moved, the home office from Florida with Jerry Reed over to, um, let's see, it's Dana. I can't remember the
Okay.
state.
Then sure. Okay.
Yeah. So anyhow, we moved it to Dana's territory, and that that took a whole lot to do that, and that was a pretty wild project and very successful. We finished it and got it to happen within those 2 years, so that was really unique. But not only that, I'm not sure. I'm not going to say that many of our members don't know, but the EC are the folks who plan the convention.
Right.
It's
Okay.
not the board, but it is actually the EC. So now, when you're on the EC, when that convention comes up, you look at how the people respond to the topics, to the presenters, to the timing. I mean, it's a big project. And you're like, wow, we did that. And that is phenomenal. It's a nice feeling. So I've been happy about, my
Good.
tenure there for that many years. And Color Lab has been great for sure.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome. Well, I'm certainly glad we're both a part of that. Going referencing back to those schools. I'm not going to ask you how many schools you've done because I don't know. You probably don't know off the top of your head.
I really don't.
But do you?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay. Um, do any of those schools stand out to you for any reason?
Any of them.
Hmm.
Well, all of them do,
Right.
for different reasons. Okay. Um, I did a teaching school,
Hmm.
which had never been done before, and it was something that, um, uh, a late caller friend of mine, Tim Mariner, and I had talked about for many years.
Hmm.
And it's like, wow, we really are good if we could put a teaching school together. So of course, obviously, Tim passed away,
Hmm.
and so I've worked with Ken quite often, and I was talking to him, and we tried to do that for several years. And a couple of years back, um, it was Kip Garvey, Ken, and myself, and we successfully got one off the ground. And boy, they working to put a syllabus together, and working with Ken and Kip, and Kip is phenomenal, to work with, and what a writer he
Yeah.
is, and to be able to put together this teaching manual. I mean, it's a syllabus for teaching. It was just like, wow, we've created something that nobody really has done, and we had a great turnout for it, and it was held in California in the Sacramento area, and boy, what a great time we had. We had students from Sweden, um, different parts of California, and other states as well. But I can't remember how many we had. I don't know if it was 10 or 12, something like that. Um, but just the working that we process that we had before we got to the school itself, and putting this manual together was just, um, interesting, very, very interesting. And those are the things that I enjoy the most,
Nice.
is that process. I mean, even in Color Lab, I was part of the condensed teach method that came upon from Chairman Elmer Sheffield at the time,
Hmm.
to try to get a smaller week type program, which similar to what we have with SSD, and we had started that about 4 years prior to SSD,
Okay.
and had accomplished a list of, and it was really kind of a combination of getting two groups together was the goal, and that was Color Lab and ACA. And
Okay.
we all started off, and the two people from Color Lab was myself and Tim Mariner, and then um, Paul Markham and Shoemake from ACA. And we all got together and spent, oh my gosh, 5, 6 months just creating the list
Yeah.
and putting all things into a logical order. And I enjoyed that kind of stuff. And we did. We put it together. It was a 12-week program. Um, and it's part of Color Lab. What happened was is that something happened and the ACA guys dropped out. And so it was just Tim and I sitting there, and the EC came and said, "Can you guys do more with this?" We said, "Sure. How much more do you want?" They said, "Do whatever you can." So we made a book of 46 pages, and which is kind of similar to what SSD kind of developed
Mhm.
uh, when Jerry had gotten that kind of on the ground from the Rio Grande Valley list that they had created many years prior. He used that particular list. Um, but anyhow, it's like we had these two kind of things going, and at the time, the EC didn't want the condensed teach method to be called a program. They wanted to avoid that. They didn't want another program,
Mhm.
and that we had to change, and we came up with condensed teach method. And it was like if you were in a perfect world, you could teach this in 12 to 15 weeks max, and the calls that were left over, if you had a mainstream club, for example, they could be taught in the mainstream dance. It wouldn't take that much, about
Mhm.
5 extra weeks. It, each call took about a minute and a half to teach. That's how easy these calls were left to do. So the condensed teach method had a lot of the mainstream calls in it. And so basically, a lot of the leftover calls were basic calls. So anyhow, the point of the thing was that if you didn't have a mainstream club, you could just stop your group right there, and it would feel like they're dancing what we know as festival mainstream today. If you went to a festival, you all know probably or have experienced, it's not going to be your all out go get them type of mainstream. It's going to
Mhm.
be some calls they do better than others.
Yep.
And that's how all that was built back when we
Okay.
had talked about it and took us so long. So it took us a while to build that, and so I like that kind of work, and I enjoy that through the organization. And so, great experience for sure. Memories that'll never be forgotten. Yes.
I wish that I could have gotten to know Tim a little more. I did take a couple schools with him. He actually taught me to dance 30 years ago.
Yes.
That was my first teacher, and
Yeah.
of course I had no thoughts of calling back then.
Right.
That hit me 15 years ago, whatever.
Uh
Um,
huh.
but yeah, Tim taught my
I didn't
wife
know
and I
that.
to dance. Yep. Um,
Wow.
out of Savannah. He didn't live in Savannah, but he would come down, I guess, probably from South Carolina then.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught the class.
Was it
Um,
Rock Hill?
yep.
Rock Hill. Yep.
And he taught the class. And, matter of fact, I even asked him one night, I said, "Hey, could I do what you're doing?" And he gave me a cassette tape of like 8 of his singing calls. And he said, "Here, go learn these." Now, he wasn't our club caller, so I probably didn't see him another 3 weeks after that
Right.
for
Right.
the longest time. And then I did take a class. I think the year that he passed away, about 6 months prior to that, I took a caller school with him and Paul Hensey um, and in Rock Hill, and
Oh, okay. Yes.
had no idea. Of course, nobody did. So yeah, I missed the chance of ever getting the call with him or anything like that. So it's kind of a
Yeah.
low point for me. But thanks for all you did with that. I mean, of course I've uh, gained a lot of work, a lot of experience from the stuff that you put in during all those times and with all the programs. And I know we may have some changes coming up. We won't get into that because
No, no, but it's a good path to go on.
I think so.
I mean, we have the SSD, which is, like I
Hmm.
said, similar to what the condensed teach method. So that's a great path to go
Right.
on. Unfortunately, we just have to get our community of callers to work together.
Yeah.
Um, and really, in all honesty, is what's going to take. And then hopefully, if that happens, we need to get the dance community to work together with it as
Yeah.
well. And if that happens, then any new caller coming in will have a chance. I mean, really, they will. They'll have a chance, and maybe even create, more new dancer programs as newer callers get involved in our activity and so forth like that. So, we got this
Yeah.
possibility to make
I never
change, and
thought
we've been
much
talking.
about, I never thought much until this past year, a call lab and everything, about talking to people about, hey, do you ever think about calling it? And it's something you might be interested in. Never thought about it. And I've done that with my club. I've got a couple of members that I was like, hey, you ever want to try and memorize a singing call and just go up there and do it one night, see what you think? So hopefully I'm trying to pull at least one out of there and
Right.
trying to build that up. Because I never thought about, if you get a younger caller, newer caller, you might
Mhm.
get 6, 7, 8 dancers that come along that are friends of theirs. Never thought of it that way.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
it opened, this past call lab opened my eyes to that. And,
Yep.
so it's just one of the other many ways caller lab's done something for me. Um, in a different direction than that, have you done a lot of traveling with your calling over the years? I
Yes.
imagine. Any
Oh yes.
venues
Oh
stand
yes.
out to you? Anything, any dance halls or anything like that, just that are just super memorable to you?
Wow. I have a lot of experiences as you know, going to England many, many times, Germany, Sweden, Japan, New Zealand, um, Denmark. I mean, they're all just phenomenal places to go to. Um, you know, um, the um, Japanese are really very, very kind. All of Europe is very, very kind. When I went to New Zealand, same. It's amazing. The treatment that you get is uh, essentially identical to each other. It's just different cultures, but they are all very, very heartwarm. Take you in. They make sure you don't need for anything, for sure. And so I've had just tremendous um, feelings for all the places that I have been, and across the United States as well. I mean, there's just a lot of places that I've been fortunate to go to, and there's, I mean, there's a lot of places I could probably say that stick out in my mind,
Yeah,
but right now I can't put my finger on just which
I
ones.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope at some point, like I said, that I can get a little more active next year for different reasons.
Hmm.
Some point I'd love to go overseas. I don't know wherever they would have me. I would love to go. I don't think I'm ready for that yet, but
Yes.
I'm still working, and
Yep.
it's a daily process. As many years as if you've been doing it and all that, and I've talked to some people. Do you have a specific process? Do you still do choreography every day when you're sitting at home, or what kind of do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of my colleagues that I know, especially in the challenge committee as community rather, as well, are very conditioned at doing X every day. And there are those who aren't in the challenge committee who are very good at doing X every day. And I've never been very good about that every day. I tend to be my creativity um, writing of material for challenge or whatever the case may be tends to come by feeling. And it's like, okay, I need to be doing this 2 months down the road. And all of a sudden, an idea comes to mind. And then I start saying, okay. And then I might spend 2, 3 hours, creating um, choreography and so forth like that for whatever that event's going to be coming down the road.
Gotcha.
When I go to my club dances, I've learned over the years how to condition my mind to pick up on things that people are doing. And I can read the floor and figure out, tonight might be a good night to do something with cast off 3/4, for example, or
Okay.
tonight might be something to do with, let's work a little bit on crossover circulates, or tonight might be something that might want to, tonight's a good night for tally hose, or tonight, it's just that kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And so I'm able to pick up on that and I kind of morph that into the dance program. Not as much as a workshop as maybe, hey, let's take a look at this, okay, and then we dance it, okay. I'm a believer, even in my lessons, that if I teach you something, my goal is to teach that particular movement thoroughly, be explicit as I can be, make sure that everybody in that room, when I look into their eyes, that they understand what I'm saying
Mhm.
in a very short period of time. I mean, very short period of time. And then let's dance it. I'm not, I don't want to spend a whole 20 minutes on trying to get you to do something. If I got to spend 20 minutes on getting you to do something, it's not worth that 20 minutes. You better put it
Right.
aside and come back to another day.
Okay.
I really want them to dance because um, my experience has been when you're teaching people, if you stop and you go, and you stop and you go, to me it's stop,
Yeah.
reset, and
Yeah.
they get used to that reset. And then somebody, even myself, called to them, and you're not stopping and you're not letting them reset. They're hearing something while they're doing something. Then all of a sudden, they might know those two calls, but they can't execute them because they're hearing one a lot earlier than expected when they had the time to reset. And that's just my personal
Yep.
thought process.
I agree on that. I've noticed it over the years of me doing it. When you have that, when I was trying to do memory, do sight, do whatever I'm doing, if you have the stop and go, stop and reset in your pattern, then you go into your singing call, and your singing call is just going to flow because you're going
Right.
to the beat of the music and all that. You realize everything I just did in pattern was what I'm doing in this singing call, but
Can't do it.
they can't keep up,
Very good
you
point.
know? And
Mhm.
so that they get used to doing the pattern for 5, 6, 7 minutes, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden you throw a singing call on, and you're like, well, hey, we can't wait for you. We got to go.
That's right. We
And
gotta go.
so
Yeah. Mhm. Yep.
and another thing
So
that hurts too a little bit, I think, with the lesser squares. With what I mean by that is where you used to have 10 squares, you got 3 squares, 4 squares,
correct.
and you have the same size dance hall. I'll notice in the middle when the first tip, everybody's shoulder to shoulder.
Mhm.
About 4 minutes into pattern, they're almost in the other squares because they're
Correct.
spreading out. And then the singing call, all of a sudden, when I say promenade halfway, they're never going to make it. Because they've got to go around the sides or the heads, and
Yes.
they just spread out. And I tell them, hey, you got to slide together, you got to stay tight.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple things working against you with that, with the
Yes.
pattern, stop and go, stop and reset in the dance halls.
Yeah.
I used to love having huge dance halls. Now, give me a 10 by 10 room with 2 squares, and I can work just fine because everybody's got to stay shoulder to shoulder.
Sure.
Oh
Absolutely.
my
But as
goodness.
far as me being conditioned about, writing material and stuff like that, I'll come up. There's a lot of times I'll be sleeping and I'll think of an idea just for some reason, and I've learned to force myself to get up
Yep.
and go and just write the idea down. And then I'll say, okay, I wrote it down, and I'm going to go back to bed. And the next day I get up, I've got to tackle it right away. And um, um, that happens quite often. And but as far as me, when I get the bug, when I get the bug to write material and so forth, and to try things out, I've got that bug sitting there for several hours.
Gotcha.
It's not just like a 10-minute thing and I'm off this. I'm dedicated.
Yep.
So yeah.
I didn't, but I do now. I think about choreography every day. I write something at least every day, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just depending on what my day is.
Right.
And it's like you said, I get up in the morning. I get up early every morning, way before I have to be at work. And if I'm working out in the gym or I'm out walking, it'll hit me just like you said, scoot
Yeah.
back. What can I do with scoot back? And then I'll go home and I'll start pushing checkers, figuring it out.
Right.
So
Yep.
it is a creative
Absolutely.
thing.
Hmm. So my
With
creativity comes when it comes.
Yep, no, I
And
understand.
yeah, it just happens to be that way. But it never fails me as far as when I have to get something ready that I can actually sit down and say, okay, we need to get this done. But I had, like I said, a lot of friends that are no longer living anymore that just every day they had a routine and they just stuck by it every day, every day. So, and when I was a kid, it was easier
Yep. Oh,
when I
sure.
learned my calling. I did
Absolutely.
all that. Yeah, when I got home from school, I did my homework, and then I worked on square dance choreography and singing calls and what have you like that. And that was an everyday process. But you know,
I can't imagine what I would have been doing if I'd have known about if I'd have been thinking about square dance calling in high school. I was a terrible student to start with. I'd have been even worse if I'd have been trying to work on choreography and singing calls. Maybe
well, I
it's
became
good that
better because mom and dad would say, "If you don't get good grades, we're not going to let you continue this
yeah, I
calling."
can
And
see
I was
where
like,
I can see where
"Oh,
that incentive would be. Yep, I see that.
absolutely, yep."
Oh,
So I mean, it really was. It
it
was.
will with the
I
levels that
met.
you call it.
I can remember my parents. Say again.
No, you can remember your parents. Go ahead.
Oh, I said my parents always kept me very humble.
Okay.
Um, back in the day when we used to have a lot of one-day festivals throughout the Maryland and the Virginia area, and it would be like an afternoon and an evening type thing. And every time I get booked for something like that, it always have my age underneath of my name. You know, Bill Harrison, 16 years old or 18 years old, and the other callers they just had their name. So I said to my mom one day, I said, why is my age underneath my name all the time? And her response is, they said, well, one day they're going to come for your calling.
Yep.
And I said, really? So mom and dad really kind of kept my head really level, that is for sure. And, that was always good. So I never had to worry about that. And I learned a lot from that for sure.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah, gosh, I can't even. I try and picture myself 16, 17, 18, trying to get up in front of a crowd and call a dance. I guess I could have tried to pull it off at some point. Who
Yeah.
knows? That's awesome. At all the levels you call at, do you have a favorite call?
That's one main question many people ask. They say, "Do you have which one do you like the?" I enjoy calling mainstream as much as I do teaching class. I enjoy teaching. Period. I
Mhm.
mean, I love teaching all of the programs that I call for, and I love calling for all of those programs.
Okay.
Everybody is, pretty much the same dancer wise, but they're all different when you go from one program to the next because they all have a different interest of where
Okay.
they want to be at that moment. And, it's like if you're calling a mainstream or a plus dance, they want nice choreography, they want smoothness, and they want a nice singing call and what have you. And as you go up in the programs, they want that choreography and the
Mhm.
singing call not so much. So I mean, there's an awful lot of difference between the people and their perspective on what they're dancing at the time. Um,
Okay.
but generally, they all want the same thing, and they want nice, good material, smooth material, a little challenging,
Mhm.
And depending on the group, how much of a challenge does it need to be? And that's probably the biggest um, and the hardest part of calling to teach is the judgment.
Right.
You know, when do you turn it on and when do you turn it off, and how do you know they're going to be able to do this or that? And that's very, very difficult. And that just comes with time and experience. And if I had to tell anybody, you know, anything about calling, always listen to your dancers. Listen to the people who come and dance to you, especially your club
Nice.
dancers, because
Okay.
they see you week after week, and they will come up and they'll say things out of their heart, really, or I didn't like that, or I
Yeah.
loved that. Um, Listen to both sides.
Okay.
I've learned that over the years.
That's good.
Uh, they really are in tune to what you're delivering because you're just one person on that stage, and they're out there and they're dancing with other people, and they have their own likes, and they hear other people, and
Mhm.
they're seeing how movement goes and how the body flow goes and how it sounds. So at any point in time in your calling career, always listen to what the dancers um, tell you. Um, and also, if you have a girlfriend, or you know, if it's a lady caller, a boyfriend, or a husband, or a wife, or man, whatever, listen to what they have to say. Your
Mhm.
counterpart, your partner, because they have ears on deck all the time. People will tell them things that you'll never hear. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they'll come to them first before they'll come to you.
Yeah. Over the years, my wife, she doesn't go to everything. Depending on where I'm going, what I'm doing, she'll go to some things.
Yeah,
She doesn't necessarily go to my club dances because that's just she knows everybody. She likes going places that she doesn't get to see people very often,
right,
so she'll go to that. But she will tell me, if I throw up a singing call, and I'll come down and she's like, it's not for you, or she'll say that's a good one. You should do that some more. Same thing, So and she is the honest one. If I go
yes,
somewhere, typically, now I've had people come up and go, hey man, I don't like how you did that. And that's fine. And I appreciate that. But most people are going to come up and tell you, hey man, I really love you, calling. I love this. They're not going to tell you negative stuff. And there are negative
right,
things. So my wife, and I've got a few other people in my small circle that will tell me, hey Charlie, don't do that singing call again,
correct,
or hey man, you really shouldn't do that. That sequence of calls because they just don't work, and you don't always see it until somebody tells you that. And so
right.
you've got to have those people behind you, because you're not
Yep,
going to get any better. If
and
everybody
always
tells you
record.
how great you are, you're not getting any better. So
Yeah, if you can record yourself, because
oh,
that
absolutely.
that'll tell you a little bit too. It's a little eye opening when you have to listen to yourself, um, but you'll find out they're probably right.
Yep.
In more
I,
instances
I
than not.
record a lot of what I do at my dances, whether it be a club dance or
Hmm.
an invite where I go call for another club. I record a lot. I put some of it on YouTube or whatever. Not
Okay.
all of it. Some of it is just for me to say,
Okay.
hey, I need to work on that, or hey, I need to do that more. Um, and every now and then I'll throw one up on YouTube or TikTok or whatever just to get
Right.
views. So yeah, absolutely, you have to record yourself. You have to.
Yes.
Uh, and people ask me, they'll ride up on me when I'm at work. When I used to work the road, I would have on my Bluetooth, I would have my singing calls going in my police car. And they're like,
Right.
what is that you're listening to? I'm like, that's me, you know? Or
Right.
I'd have my own patter going over my speakers,
Right.
thinking, I need to do this, I need to do that. So yeah, absolutely. That's a great advice there. Um,
Yes.
what's some of your favorite singing calls?
Some of my favorite ones. Oh
Mhm.
wow. I've never really thought about it that way. I have probably a list that I call road songs.
Okay.
And they're just kind of like songs that I go to when I do special dances, anniversaries, festivals, and what have you like that. And that might be 20, 20, 25 or so songs that I just
Oh wow.
really enjoy
Okay.
playing. You
Very
know,
nice.
one of my I have a lot of favorites. I really do, but one of my favorites is one that I recorded. And my problem is that I can remember who corners are and partners are, but I am terrible at titles.
Okay.
Now, if you play a piece of music for me, I can usually pick out the label it's on, and I can probably tell you who recorded it. But I probably cannot tell you the title of that song. I don't know what it is about me, but I am there. It's called "The Morning of My Mind," and it's ESP. I recorded on ESP. Oh, I love the way we did it, the music arrangement. But I did it. It originally was on Blue Star,
Okay.
and not many people did that song, as far as I could hear. Um, I remember when I released "Morning of My Mind," Randy Doherty, um, we were talking. He said, "Do you have the Blue Star one?" And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "I still use that." I said, "You're kidding. You and me so far are the only two people I know that have called that song." And the reason that I redid the song is because I became good friends with Bob Fisk. And Bob Fisk was one of those guys back in the day that got into the challenge as well. But Bob was probably your all around caller for sure. I mean, he was a really good singer, beautiful voice. He could call any program up into the challenge programs, and he did them all well. And he was a tall fella, good looking man. Um, I mean, he just had everything going. Bob was really a neat guy. And we became very, very good friends. And I would keep in touch with Bob. And I recorded that song in really memory of Bob, because Bob had passed away. And about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later, I had talked to Elmer and said, "Look, I know this is on Blue Star, but I said, I really would like to redo this." And I said, my reasoning was because of Bob. And so that was my reasoning. So when I do that particular song, um, you know, I have a little bit more in my head than just singing the song, because I can think about Bob and so forth like that. So it kind of reminds me of that, you know. So yeah, I've got some songs like that that are kind of my favorites. You know, I got a good 25 or so that I use.
Very nice.
I really enjoy all of the labels. I really do. Um, I have probably just about everything that Royal ever did. Rhythm, um, back Red Boot when it was back in the day. You know, those same K-Lox. C.O. Guest was the owner of K-Lox, and we were very good friends. Um, and So I have some of those good memories of some of those songs that I do use. So, and a lot of the stuff that's coming out new today is really really good. It's
Yeah.
well rounded, and so yeah, I couldn't
Yes.
really. I'd have to really sit down and look at my list
No, I understand. I
of the
understand.
ones that I really, there's a One Call Away, which is on New Beat, that I really love doing.
That's one of the
Um,
ones I just bought yesterday.
Yeah,
I
it's
just got it
really
yesterday.
do enjoy that. Yeah,
Mhm.
I got a lot of them that I really enjoy calling, and of course the songs that we have on ESP as well. You
Yeah.
know, so but that one is that Morning of My Mind is one that I kind of favor,
Mhm.
but for that particular reason.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I have two. A gentleman that got me into this, and I've mentioned his name before, Ray Monty, out of Kennesaw. He passed away a couple years ago, and called a really long time. He's the one that got me into Call Lab. He's the one that taught me my first modules, for lack
yes,
of a better thing. And for a year had me doing singing calls. But one of his go tos, and I danced at his club for a couple of years, and was Unwound and Lukenbach, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And when he broke, matter of fact, the first time I was a huge George Strait fan long before square dance.
Sure.
And I'd square dance for about 2, 3 years, on and on, here and there, and to your typical, I don't know a better term, square dance music. But it was music I didn't know the songs. They all sounded kind of the same to me with banjos and fiddles and everything.
Right.
But one night we were dancing and we squared up and we did patter and he put on Unwound and I was like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
I thought this is a real song. I know this song. This is George Strait. And I had no idea. It's the first time I'd ever noticed something like that. And that's kind of what flipped the switch in me. And I was like, wait a minute, I can do songs that I know if I'm a caller. And so at that point, I thought I got to figure out how to get up there and start singing songs and find.
Yeah.
So, and so I do Unwound pretty regular if I'm not at my club because they've heard
Right.
it enough. And Lukenbach, Texas, also same thing. If I'm not at my club, if somebody invites me over to do it, I'm going to pull out Lukenbach, Texas. And for Jet Roberts, I have to say this: Jambalaya is my favorite singing call.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, I have to bring that up every
Yep.
podcast.
Well, another one is New World in the Morning that Tom and I did together on Global.
Okay.
And a little story behind that if we've got time.
Oh, we got plenty of time. Go ahead.
In 2000, the Washington area um, Dancer Association put on the National Square Dance Convention, but held it in Baltimore. And we were going down the hallway, basically, and we were passing this one hall, and we heard Gary Shoemake calling. And we both looked at each other and said, hey, let's go say hi to Gary. So we mosey on into the hall, and Gary's calling, and we went to the bottom of the stage, and hey, Gary, you kind of waved to him and all that. And he was happy to see us, and we were happy again to say hi to him as well. And he finished his patter. He said, hey, he said, I was going to do this singing call, and would you guys come up and do it with me? And Tom and I said, sure. So we got up there, and he told everybody on the crowd. He said, look, he said, this came out and these two guys, it's called New World in the Morning. These two guys actually recorded this song that I'm going to do. And of course, Tom and I looked at each other and said, oh, wow, this is cool. And so Gary put and back then we didn't have this 2000, so we didn't have digitized music. We still had vinyl.
Yep.
So he put the 45 on the turntable and he put the needle down. He said, you guys ready? He said, yes, we are. And we started singing, and then he stopped everybody. He just stopped and he pulled the needle off the record. And we're like, oh my God, what's going on? I mean, nobody does that.
Right.
Okay. You just, it's like, you just don't do that. And he goes, folks, I am so sorry. He said, I put this on the wrong side. And Tom and I are looking at each other thinking, what do you mean on the wrong side? That's the instrumental side. And he went and he looked at it, he flipped it over, and he goes, oh my gosh. He said, I had it on the right side. He said, you guys sounded just like the record. and and we started busting up laughing. But that was a fun song to do, and we were really, I have to say, that was Tom and I have worked many, many, many years together, and most people know that we're brothers. I mean, we really are that close, and it's amazing how tight that particular song was between our vocals, and we've done several together that are really nice and tight like that. And but it was amazing how that actually fooled Gary. That he's like, wait a minute, this sounds just like the other side.
That's
And so you
great.
figure you go into a studio, it's going to be a different sound.
Yep.
All of a sudden, you're actually performing it in live, and he's like, oh my God, and he stopped the whole floor, and that's something we talk about on and on over the years. That it's like, wow. So anyhow,
That is a great story. That's awesome. Well, Bill, before we shut it down, I ask everybody, I know you've seen some of the podcasts, and a little bit about you, and this is something I started just for fun. Are you a movie guy or TV guy?
I'm a TV guy, and I do like movies. Now, when you say movies, are you talk about watching the movie on the TV, or you like
Well,
going to the theater.
A,
Yeah,
a little bit of both. I mean, nowadays, just about everything you can watch on the TV. You don't have to go to the theater
correct.
anymore, for the most
Yeah,
part.
I'm a big movie and TV watcher for sure.
Okay.
Yes,
Footloose or Dirty Dancing? What do you prefer?
I like them both
Okay.
actually
Okay.
for different reasons, but I like them both. Yeah, I thought
Okay.
they were really, really good.
And this is the same as singing calls too. What's some of your favorite movies?
Some of my favorite
Yeah,
movies.
just in general.
See, once again, you got me because titles are not my thing. Okay, so
Are you a
I'm
Western
very
guy?
I
What do
am
you say?
very fortunate that I can watch a movie that I love and then a week later watch the same movie
Yep,
like I've never seen it before.
agreed. I
So
know that. I know that.
yeah, and so some of them that I like a lot. I mean, like I'm an action type guy, so
Okay.
I like that kind of a movie. I like Redemption. Was it Shawshank Redemption? Redemption of
Right.
Shawshank or
Shawshank
something like that.
Redemption. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, I'm not like I say. I have to admit I'm not a title person, so I'm going to mess up
Okay.
some of these titles. The Green Mile, I enjoyed that a lot,
Fantastic movie. Yep. Wow,
but
that's a good one.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of I love the Equalizer. Um,
You know,
I'm
I just finished I just finished the third
or
Equalizer. I
yeah,
just got onto that phenomenal three movies. Equalizer
aren't
one,
they?
two, and three. I had no idea. It just kept popping up on Facebook and all that, like the new
Yep.
Equalizer three. I went back and I was like, wow, how did I not watch Denzel Washington, one of my favorite actors.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how good those movies were. Just finished number three literally
Yep.
last week. Love
I'm a
those
big John
movies.
Wayne. I'm a big
Okay.
John Wayne fan. So I can watch all of those movies, Rio Grande and whatever their titles are. I can watch them all and still True Grit. Okay, now
Mhm.
it took me a while, but I finally went and watched the newest one out. You
Yep.
know, the
I
redo.
know. Mhm.
Doesn't hold a candle to old John.
I imagine. Yeah.
But I mean, so I've got a lot of movies and that I enjoy that I go back and I can. Matter of fact, I just watched a couple past couple of nights where I had already seen them before, but I enjoyed watching them again.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm just one of those guys that I can end up watching a movie and then, like I said, a week later I can watch the same movie and go,
I agree. Yeah. I tell you a
"Oh, this is
quick
exciting."
little funny story. Our son was in the Air Force and he was stationed in northern Japan for quite a while.
Hmm.
And at one point, we decided, my wife and I, to go see him. And we took the flight, and it's long. We flew to L.A. I think that's about 5 hours. Then we took
Yep,
L.A. to
13.
Japan, about 12, 13 hours. So
Yep,
all total with that, 18 hours in the air, and then layover for about 2 hours. So almost a full day.
correct.
In that, and I'd seen them before, the whole Jason Bourne series with Matt Damon.
Yes, I love those. Yes.
Loved them. I watched from Atlanta to Japan every Jason Bourne. By the time I hit Japan, I thought, maybe, am I a secret agent? Am I here on a mission? I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm doing.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Um,
we've watched all those. My wife and I watched all those, and including the one where he wasn't in. It was another.
I think that was four. That was the one with Jeremy Renner. Um,
Yes, yes, correct,
yep.
correct. Yes,
I
and
like
we
to
still
pretend that
enjoyed
one didn't
that.
exist. I love Jeremy Renner and everything he's done, but I like to pretend that one does not exist in the
Yeah,
Jason Bourne
right.
series.
Yes, yes, I understand.
Okay,
It was still
that's
good,
awesome.
but it
Yep.
just you know it
Yeah. I
there
like
was good
I
movies.
like Matt Damon in that
Yes.
role. I appreciate Jeremy Renner with
Hmm.
everything he's done, and that was a fine movie, but it wasn't Jason Bourne to me because
Yes.
Matt Damon is made to play that role. And there's a lot of people like that, like John Wayne. And
Yeah.
his, you can remake it, and it might be a good movie, but it's not the one with John Wayne in it.
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
think about redoing The Godfather
Oh my.
without everybody that's in every role in that.
Oh
Marlon
no.
Brando, you replace him. I don't care who it is. You could find somebody that might do it well, but you're not going to redo it with Marlon Brando and The Godfather.
And that's true.
Uh,
Absolutely. All of them were excellent. I mean, they
yep.
were really, yeah, they were above par for sure.
Bill, are you going to be at the Nationals?
No, won't be able to Nationals.
Okay.
Yep, not won't be able to make it this year.
All right, I'll miss you there.
Yep.
But I don't know where I'll get to if you're not going to be at nationals. I'm not sure when our paths will cross. Probably at Caller Lab.
Well,
Caller Lab for sure next year. But hopefully somewhere before then down the road, we'll be able to run up on each other and sit down and have a meal maybe and talk a little bit. It's been my pleasure, sir. Bill, great talking to you again. It has been a while. I mean, we get a few minutes at Caller Lab on occasion. But hopefully we can sit down at one point, maybe do this again, maybe next year. I've got to go back and start talking to people because you've got 100 more hours of your square dance to talk about. I'd love to hear it all. Yeah. Bill, it's been my pleasure, brother. This is going to come out this Friday, and it took us a couple weeks to do this. I'm sorry about that. We had to reschedule a time or two because of your time, my time, but awesome that we got to do this. It's been my pleasure, Bill. It's great talking to you.
Earl, you take care and keep safe, okay?
All right, Bill. Great talking to you, buddy.
You betcha, buddy.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Circle to the left when the sun goes down on my side of town. That lonesome feeling comes through my door. Left out of man. Alabama left and we. There's a rundown bar across the railroad track. I got a table for two way in the back. I spend most every night beneath the light of a neon moon. Head square through four and no, with your corner do side do. Touch a quarter, scoot back and then boy run. Get a right or left through. Past the ocean, everybody folded. Swing and let it promenade back home. Spend most every night beneath the light of a neon moon. Head square through, oh and you know, with your corner, do side do. Touch a quarter, scoot back and then boy run. Get a right or left through. Past the ocean, everybody folded. Swing and let it promenade back home. But I'll be alright as long as there's light from a neon moon. Circle to the left if you lose your one and only. There's always room here for the lonely. Left out of mind your corner, dose I know you're wrong, girl, and men start left boys. You turn your body right and do it left out of mind. Swinging later once then you're promenade the land. Watch your broken dreams dance in and out of the beams of a neon moon. Side square through, take a four and you know, with your corner, dose I do. Touch a quarter, scoot back and then boy run. And a right or left through. Past the ocean here, everybody fold. Swing and let it promenade back on. I spend most every night beneath the light of a neon moon. Side square through, oh and you know, with your corner, just I do. Touch a quarter, scoot back and then boy run right and right or left through. Past the ocean, everybody fold. Swing and let it promenade back home. I spend most every night beneath the light of a neon moon. Now there's a four ladies promenade one time. Wanna get back on the swing and let it push on the right and then you join hands, circle left, moving around and do it left down the man, weave the ring. If you lose your one and only, there's always room here for the lonely. Watch your broken dreams dance in and out of the beams of a neon moon. Swinger, watch your